Good afternoon. You're listening to Gambling with an Edge. Now here are your hosts, Bob Dancer and Richard Munchkin.
Good afternoon. Welcome to Gambling with an Edge. I'm Bob Dancer.
And I'm Richard Munchkin.
Today our guest is a sports bettor and a sports betting software guy, originally from Australia, named Adam Bjorn. Adam Bjorn, welcome to Gambling with an Edge.
Thanks for having me. It's good to meet you guys and look forward to the chat.
All right. So when did you get into betting or booking or whatever it is that you do?
So as I sort of look back, and horses is what I began in, trotters, thoroughbreds, whatnot. I definitely know there's one event I remember very clearly was a 125 to 1 shot in the 1988 Australian Cup, which would actually make me 12 or 11 at the time. And there is some small traces to even going back earlier than that. So I've sort of been betting, mid 40s now, 30 plus years. And then I sort of got onto the other side straight out of high school. Ended up being a ticket writer in Northern Territory in Darwin, which had legal sports betting in the mid 90s, and was sort of on that side of the counter at 18. So that's sort of where I've sort of been generally doing this my entire life, especially the adult life portion of it. And generally it's more of not what I do, but who I am these days. It's just ingrained in, what I've become and where I've grown up doing it.
But when you started betting horses, at some point, I assume you became a winning player. And how did you go about getting an edge?
So again, a lot of it, was information and that back in the day. I mean, my first sports bet that I really recall was the George Foreman Michael Moorer fight. I just turned 18. Sports betting had just come to the state that I was in. And again, I was sort of just playing the numbers, whatnot. But my big advantage early on, late 90s, was information. It was early days of the internet in Australia. I'd met a few Indian cricket bettors, bookmakers. So I sort of learnt that there was more than just Australia. You had the UK market, you had Vegas. And then I also was working with CanBet also in the 90s, which then again opened up, opportunities of 7 to 2, 4 to 6, two-way opportunities. In the Australian Open final, Martina Hingis, Mary Pierce, it was 7 to 2 one side in the US and 4 to 6 the other side in Australia. So I really had a massive advantage betting into these things. I remember getting numbers from Vegas. An NBA game, I'd get it in the afternoon, or the morning line would have been in the US, and the point spread was 4.5, yet everyone in Australia had 9, and 9 to 2 money lines and things like that. So my edge in the beginning was information, global knowledge, and then just taking advantage, understanding what it all meant, numbers in different places.
Wow, those were the days. This reminds me of when I talk to blackjack players and they talk about, back in the days when Vegas was all single deck and they wouldn't throw you out right away and things like that. So it sounds like in the early days of the internet for sports bettors, if you had access to the world, it was really just easy money.
Yeah, well, again, in Australia, I was doing overnights doing US sports, and then the daytimes I was doing horses. And then I moved to Jamaica end of 2000, and it was again, I was doing night shifts in Jamaica doing European and Australian sports, and just, become ingrained in that sort of offshore US, Curacao, Costa Rica, Antigua, finding all these new sports books that were just putting up lines and had no idea why they were putting up lines, and sort of got to take that advantage as well. I also managed, through the course of realizing that I betted much more when I was working at a shop, because you got all the information in the world from the bettors. You also got the information. You built the discipline because you're working 14, 16, 18-hour days. So your betting was just part of your job kind of thing. And then also, again, you know, in Jamaica, I was working at the Greek Olympic Sports, and I was seeing how the second half lines were made. And it was just insane to me of watching somebody post a halftime line, realizing how he did it, and then seeing every other book on the planet just copy that number. So, you know, it was really an insight of having the advantage of that, seeing a number going up, seeing the first bet hit that number, and then everybody just having the same number and being able to take advantage of, again, understanding that these numbers getting posted weren't scientifically done like they are today with so many people, playing with advantage and using the algorithms and the technology and the stats and all that kind of thing. They were really soft.
What made you decide to move to Jamaica?
So by 2000, I'd kind of uh, won out my welcome in Australia with the bookies. I was kind of known as a sniper. You know, they'd open their numbers and I'd just shoot them down. I'd work for most of them. So I'd done some time in Darwin, I'd done some time in Sydney, some time in Canberra. Um, so I was sort of known from, again, both sides of the fence, as much as a customer as an operator. And one night I'd been to the Olympics in Sydney, went back to Melbourne, and emailed about 150 sports books. And within 48 hours, I'd gotten a call from a guy that used to bet into a place I worked at, asked me, is this you sending emails to Spiro in Jamaica? I said, yeah. um, would you move to Jamaica? And I'm like, well, of course. Or you just think of Jamaica's palm trees and beaches and stuff like that. It's not quite that, but again, it was like the offer was in US dollars, which was 2.5 to 1 Australian dollars. So suddenly, I was earning a lot more out the gate to sort of go over there and ply my trade. And again, once I got over there, it was like just opening a whole new world to what was available.
If you were betting all these offshore sports books back in the early days, you must have had some incidents where you got stiffed.
Not too many. Again, I sort of was always careful and I'd had enough run-ins sort of in Australia, same things again, whether it was hand-to-hand betting and different things like that. There was really only one, I think, Bet Camelot that was around out of, I think, Kanawaki or something at one stage, was one that I got caught in. But I'd actually ended up moving to Curacao right after like the Aces Gold and the Patriots Rams Super Bowl that just shut down, a whole heap of books. So I was sort of lucky enough that it was sort of post that to again understand that, seeing how these books are operated, the guys that are operating them, there was no regulation, which I'd come from heavy regulation in Australia. And really it was, being super careful where you played with. And even today, I mean, I don't play as much as I used to, but there's still some definite advantages out there. But, I give up a lot of places to play at just because, again, getting paid, you've got to win twice, and that's just too difficult.
Yeah, also, I would think being an operator at the same time might buy you a little more, uh, you might be more likely to get paid if they know you're working for Spiro than, just some random guy in Iowa.
Yeah, there probably was that. But I also always made sure that I started pulling my balances down in December, just because I, had seen again, how these books work with Super Bowl and everyone come, there's a run on the banks after it, and I was very precarious in that side as well. Having sort of such a broad range of outs across, all the continents kind of thing. I could really pick and choose again where I ran balances up back in the day. Again, a Pinnacle or a Bet Chris or those kind of places. I really had no fear in leaving sort of decent balances with them because they just weren't going anywhere.
But some places were going somewhere.
There were some that were definitely careful, and the Bet Camelot one, I actually dodged a bullet because I had, I think it was Yuri Novak at 60s or 80 to 1, and I believe he made the Australian Open final against Agassi right before, again, tennis in Australia is in January, which runs sort of into the Super Bowl time, which is when you don't want to have big balances. Um, and thankfully, I sort of edged and Agassi won, but I could have really been in a spot where I would have got caught losing a lot more in that scenario. But you can sort of sense. I mean, back in the day, again, you had the sportsbook reviews and the different threads and whatnot, and you could sort of watch those things and see a slow payment here, a slow payment there, and you could sort of read some of these things, just like reading a game, reading the form guide. You had to sort of read the sportsbook's health as well.
Did you have sometimes several accounts with the same operator under different names? Is that part of?
Generally, no. I mean, I think at my peak, I probably was betting at 200 to 250 different outs. I'd had thousands of accounts closed, but I never had it two at the same time. Once my account was closed and shut down, then my mum would open an account. Once she got shut down, I'd do them in consecutively rather than parallel, because again, it was just most of them. Again, you get. I'm quite happy to get my bet, get my limit, let them move the number. Again, some of the softwares didn't really have that ability, so there was opportunity to do that, but it was more of uh, sort of letting other people know, hey, this number's over here, and you'd have 4 or 5 friends hit it, but again, you're all sort of operating your own balances.
Now, at some point, did you move to Bet Chris?
So yeah, I was actually, after I'd left Spur, I took some years off, went and looked at different industries, whatnot, while still betting, and then actually was looking for software to open a Jamaican sports book. And I'd applied for a bookmaker's license there. And then I actually went to Costa Rica to look for software, and then got introed to BetChris, and then sort of did some consulting, risk management for them, and then ultimately got the license in Jamaica. And I said, all right, I'm off. And then I said, well, you keep working. What could we do? How can we keep this going? And I ended up doing like a franchise deal of the brand and getting the rights to use the brand for the operation I was running in Jamaica.
So, was that mainly catering to Jamaican players, or?
Yeah. So I mean, the operation I had in Jamaica, again, Jamaica's an old colonial Commonwealth uh, culture. So again, horse racing's very big still. They are a gambling culture. They have lotto and sports and horses and whatnot. And it's a fairly healthy industry. It's probably 50-50 regulated and unregulated. So there was some, again, various options to play into. And again, it was very soft numbers. A lot of same thing you're seeing in the US currently, where the intralots and the meridians and some of these European books were just setting up shops, thinking this would be easy, go to Jamaica or any of these Caribbean and Latin American areas, just offer numbers, and generally you got recreational players. Um, Again, it's sort of soft spots, cash. So it was always cash betting, so they didn't really know who was betting. So you could sort of send people across the island and bet in 3 or 4 places at the same time, and things like that. It's sort of the same old games that you had to do online, but again, this was it was anonymous. But then on the bookmaking side, it was more, I stood up at the track and offered fixed odds at the racetrack on horses, sort of bringing again what they did a lot of in the 60s, 70s, and 80s that had kind of gone away, and then bringing a little bit of that back to the local racing industry.
Do you take players from outside Jamaica?
No, I wasn't with that license. It was purely just licensed and regulated under the Gaming Commission in Jamaica, and it was purely just running that business through there.
And was that a brick and mortar shop, or was that
I
online?
had I had a couple of shops, but they had mobile betting as well. So they just sort of, I was one of the first licenses to get internet mobile betting, and it was just sort of branching out into that at that point in time.
Were Jamaican bettors as savvy as or as unsavvy as U.S. or Australian bettors?
They're probably in the middle. I mean, I would think, not to sort of attack the Americans in their betting skill. I know there's, good bettors all over the world, but the American culture and industry was seen as probably the softest. Uh, they're the clients you wanted to go after. I mean, that's why everyone's running to the US now, because it was always seen globally as sort of the softest market for bettors uh, on the masses kind of thing. Jamaicans were savvy in a sense of they were educated. Again, the US versus Jamaica is a lot more educated in understanding what odds are, the different types of bets. And then again with Australia, we've been betting with bookmakers for 100 years kind of thing, and sports betting's been around since I think late 70s, early 80s in some areas. Um, so again, it's just the culture of growing up with it. And Jamaicans, again, you learn very early to gamble, whether it's lotto or horses or sports now as well.
Is the horse racing in Jamaica parimutuel, or is it all fixed odds?
It's parimutuel. It's all parimutuel. Again, I sort of offered a few things fixed odds, and I know BetMakers is trying to go down there and offer some fixed odds stuff. But again, in the 60s and 70s, a lot of it was that English style fixed odds before the parimutuel come in. I mean, I believe at one stage there was anywhere from 14 to 20 racetracks in Jamaica. Now there's one, but yeah, apparently it was a very, very robust and sort of a high society kind of sport, again, 30, 40, 50 years ago.
But it's died out.
It's gotten smaller. There's a lot of antics go on now in the racing. A lot of horses, odds on favourites, seemingly running last, but the exactas pay out nicely. Um, Bit of pool padding, manipulation, whatnot. Because again, the pools are fairly small these days versus stories that I've heard from many, many years ago.
So when you say pool padding and manipulation, who is this who's doing the cheating?
Well, again, it's just the gamblers. I mean, when you've got, even with 30% takeouts, when your pools are so small, um, there was some flaws in the process where you could, put a really big bet on the horse would be like 1 to 9, and then you could cancel bets right before the jump. And then a lot of these people that have OTBs are also betting and playing around with the numbers. They've changed the process since then. They've got a little bit smarter and whatnot, but again, their takeouts are still 30%, so it's sort of hard to overcome no matter what you try and do. And then obviously there was the unregulated side as well, which again, there was you could probably get on more betting with non-licensed bookmakers than what you could with the actual parimutuel.
Now, rebates are a big part of horse racing in many areas. Was that part of the deal in Jamaica as well?
No, not so much. Again, if you own an OTB and you're working with the track, you get a percentage of commissions on sales. So, I have an OTB over there, so any pick sixes or anything that I'm messing around with, I'll generally send them through the OTB that I have, so that I can get, anywhere between 5 and 6% commission. But rebates, as you guys know it, was never really a thing down there, as far as my experiences were.
Now, in some gambling, players have been beaten up or threatened or physically hurt for being a good player. Have you experienced any of that?
No, nothing of that nature. Even going back into the 90s in Sydney, and you'd hear all the stories of people collecting money and whatnot. But no, I mean, I'm sure those things are out there, but I've never experienced them in my time in the industry.
have.
So
Go ahead.
I'm, well, I was just going to say, so at some point you somehow got involved in creating software for sports books.
Yeah, so about what are we now? 4 or 5 years I've sort of been into it. And again, I knew everything as a customer. I know what a customer needs. I know what the risk managers and the bookmakers need. So what I'd started to do was, again, the challenge has always been that generally software is built by people that have never placed a bet or never taken a bet. And then you have people building software that, maybe run a sports book, but again, they've been more from a marketing side or not the hardcore gambler per se, of trying to develop this stuff. So it always seemed like there was a niche in the middle of if you could put together the right software that catered to everything on the customer side and then also to the risk management and the automation on the bookmaker side, that there seemed an opening for there. So I'd met a guy, I think it was at ICE 4 or 5 years ago, and that was sort of his goal. He had been looking at the UK market, which again to me seemed interesting because it was always, to me, there's just a massive underserved market globally. Um, so I'd sort of been starting to work with that, and again now 3, 4, 5 years into it, have learnt a lot of things that I'd never intended to, never had any interest to, but I've really seen that the entire global market is really struggling on the tech side. I mean, even the DraftKings going by SB Tech, but again, to deconstruct that and then rebuild it is probably a 3 to 4 year journey and a big expense. Um, and there's a lot of impediments and restrictions of what you can do on both sides, whether it's for the customers. You have a lot of people complaining about, the spinning wheel, or they can't get this bet type, they can't get that bet type. That's generally the UI and the software impediments. And on the other side, the risk management team's not getting, you know, auto movers, bet tickers, being able to see real time action coming in so they can adjust their numbers quickly. And then also having protection of an auto mover where a particular customer bets and then the line moves and then the bookmaker can adjust it, so it gives them that sort of 5 seconds to be able to do something with a bit of protection. And that way they can be a bit more aggressive as well, where they can put up numbers, have people on an auto move where the number sort of gets beat into place on that. Um,
So your software identifies sharp players so that it can automatically adjust the
well,
number
it's
if
yeah, it's not
that
necessarily the
player.
software. It's still sort of the humans behind the traders per se,
So the
customer
traders have to
profiling.
tag the account
Yeah.
as
So
a
it's still
sharp player.
yeah, it still comes down to the customer profiling of the traders. And again, that's sort of the big difference in the world as well as, these days a lot of the Europeans and even the US market just to, you know, put up a number, let people bet. If they're going to beat you or if you think they have an edge, kick them out and let the recreationals play. Whereas I still think there's more value in paying people properly to sit behind the machines, see all the bets coming in, profile the customers, and then improve the technology to be able to use that as well as the individual skill set and knowledge, to let everybody bet and and use the information and do it again, the old school way, or the way that I grew up knowing and understanding it, versus again kicking out and limiting people. To me it's just weak and soft. I don't have an issue with companies doing it because again, everybody has their own business models. Everyone wants to make money. Um, but I think there's still many ways to make money without going that route of just limiting and kicking people out.
Yeah. Preach it to the choir.
But in Jamaica, as well as other places, they do kick people out regularly.
Oh yes, yeah. So funny enough, I've been betting, some golf stuff and different things. And a sports book that I've been playing with in Jamaica actually stopped offering golf altogether. And we'd been fairly successful sort of the last year and then early this year, but they've literally taken golf off the board completely, where not a single customer has access to the golf, purely just because of what we'd sort of done to them, the course of the last 12 months.
So there was when majors happen and people really want to get the bets down, do they?
Can't bet. Yeah,
And,
they
and
took it down right before the Masters, and I really thought they'd put it back up. They didn't. They put it up after the second round. They put some, a pick winner market in that. And then they put up the following week after that, which we had a really good result betting into it. And then that was it. And we've had two majors since, and they've not offered a single market on golf for both of those majors.
you, boy, you're a tough customer.
Well, I mean, and that's where I sort of, whenever I'm asked sort of for new people getting in, like, where are the edges still? There's still edges out there. Um, it's harder if you have wife and kids and that stuff, but if you're young and you want to get into sports betting, I mean, go to the far ends of the earth, just chipping away at these retail places, taking advantages of sports that you know really well that are, again, underserviced in some areas. Again, I grew up, I was sort of doing US sports in Australia, so I learnt that, took advantage of all the Australian books on US sports, then moved to the other side of the world and was taking advantage of all the European sports with the US sports books. So that's really, you've just got to know the lay of the land, understand what you want to get out of it, and then, just go out there and challenge it and chip away.
Yeah, I think often people's vision is too narrow. If they live in the United States, they're only looking at the books in the United States and they're only looking at football and basketball and baseball because that's what they know. And
Right.
yeah,
Yeah, I
if you
mean,
start,
and that's one of the, MMA is the one sport that if anyone says, what should I do at the moment? I think MMA is really soft numbers. It's really good volume for the sports books. There's a lot of recreational players playing, and it's probably a sport you can get decent limits on without setting off any alarm bells or anything like that. Um, and there's a few others. I guess tennis is still one there's some opportunity, but there's those are grinding sports, kind of like baseball and even NBA to an extent. Um, but again, it's really just knowing what you understand and then trying to see where the edges are or the advantages are on those side of things.
All right, we're talking to Adam Bjorn. We are going to have a brief commercial. We will be back. The South Point has more than 10,000 games returning at least 99%. This is more such games than anyone else has. Throughout July, there's a $650,000 summer money madness promotion, which means there will be two simultaneous casino-wide progressives at all times, and they can be won at any machine with the player's card inserted that has played at least $1 in the past minute. The larger progressive starts at 10,000 and must hit by 25,000. All active players not actually hitting the progressive receive $25 in free play. The smaller progressive ranges between 1,000 and 2,500 and is expected to go off about 3 times a day.
if you're serious about card counting, the Blackjack Apprenticeship membership is a great way to learn, train, network, and get the resources you need to succeed. We've had quite a few guests on Gambling with an Edge who exclusively trained and got their start through Blackjack Apprenticeship. So check out their website at blackjackapprenticeship.com. They have member forums, training software, and guides to help you learn. That's blackjackapprenticeship.com, and you will find a link to it in the show notes.
Videopoker.com is the best place to play lots of games. If you sign up for the gold membership, $8.95 a month or $79.95 a year, This allows you to get correction on many of these games. The game of the week is Spin Poker Deluxe. It plays the same as Spin Poker, which has 9 lines active, except Spin Poker Deluxe has 20 lines active, making it a 100 coins per play game. The expected value and the strategy for this game is the same as the single line version. All right, we're talking to Adam Bjorn. Now you mentioned that uh, you both work. You help create software, and you told us a little bit about what it is you do with software. Are you working on software now?
Yes, that's generally I spend all my time working out on getting a software to a level, and now at the point where I'm starting to go out and talk to customers or finding clients for different jurisdictions. Our client that we have right now is BetChris, which operate in Latin America. Um, so, we're always doing the both software, the risk management, setting the odds, whatnot, on that side of things, and then now looking to sort of get into other jurisdictions, finding the right client. Generally I can have 20 conversations, 18 of them are dead as we walk in the door. One of them will sort of pique my interest but doesn't go anywhere, and then I'll find one that again is looking to operate, you know, to use the terms that everybody knows, the Circa model or the Pinnacle model or the offshore model or whatever it is. I've sort of seen, when I moved over this side of the world 20 years ago, my first thing was, why the hell doesn't the US open up, tax it? Again, they were in the middle of multiple wars. It seemed like a good reason to tax things and build up their cachet of money. And then sure enough, 18 years later, they get around to it. But it's really just trying to go to every jurisdiction, find somebody that's willing to offer a product that will take a bet, limits bottom up rather than top down, and just show them that we have the tools, or we've been building the tools and also the experience and knowledge to be able to back them in being able to offer that. And that's sort of the goal. Thankfully, the owner of the company has given me a runway of, again, I'm not looking to do it in 12 and 24 months. I'm looking at 5 years, 10 years, to sort of take the single platform with, whether it takes 8, 10, 12, 15 customers to cover every square inch of the earth. But again, it's just bit by bit.
Does your software set the lines?
So again, no, generally the numbers generally come from either an internal model that comes up with pre-game lines based on, again, stats, data, whatnot, or traders. Again, a lot of the stuff that I've thrown up is just pulling numbers out of from data, or even before there's a market kind of thing, and then just taking bets and letting it get bet into place. And kind of doing it of that nature. But there's different, again, some of it's more high tech than others. Some of it's just still old notebook and pencil kind of thing and coming up with that first number.
You mentioned bottom up instead of top down. Can you explain those terms a little bit?
Yeah, so generally, I want to offer house limits to everybody. So if it's a game, small games like horse matchups per se for a nickel or a dime, but everybody gets that no matter who you are. And then of course, if there's, VIPs or good customers, you can go up 2x, 3x, 4x of the limits. But generally, it's more of have a house limit that everybody can bet, get a fair bet, uh, move the number, and if they want to bet it again, great. Whereas what you're experiencing in the industry generally today is they might have a limit of $1,000, and then there's people getting $3, $10, $12, $20 that have been limited to get, 1% or 2% or 5% of what the actual game limit is.
And so your product is only of use to those books that have we'll call it an enlightened model.
Again, I mean, anybody can sit on it. We can, if someone comes along with a big enough check, then obviously it's a conversation that I'd like to have. But I'm also in these conversations, speaking to people that don't have $100 million a month marketing budget, so they need to find another way to get the niche or their market share, whatnot. Um, and again, a lot of people, the general public, and a lot of people in the industry just don't think this model can work. Obviously, we're seeing Circa battling away at the moment and doing it. And yes, it is a lot harder to do in regulated territories than unregulated territories. Um,
Why is that?
but again, what's that?
Why is that? Why is it harder
Well,
in a regulated?
well, just your taxes and your operational costs, your
Ah,
licensing fees. I mean, right now, just market access in the US is insane. Uh, those costs just don't exist around the rest of the world to have to pay, you know, uh, 25 millions just for a market access license kind of thing, and then restricted in, New York to 6 licenses or 10 licenses. Generally, everywhere is an open market. Um, and that again, that's sort of the variance of understanding. Ultimately, once you know the rules of the game and what the playing field is, then you can sort of build your model into that of what you need to do and how to tackle that. And then obviously again in the US with your 1/4% excise tax on the volume, well, you're behind it before you even see a final score kind of thing.
Now, you're both a programmer and a salesman, is that right?
Definitely not a programmer, and I'm not a very good salesman. It's generally, again, I know what the customers are looking for. They're just looking for a fair crack at, placing a bet and having their entertainment enjoyment. I know what the bookmakers are trying to do. Just put up a number, be able to efficiently trade those numbers, let the bets come in, move the number, do whatever they need to do, grade it at the end, and then have the monies go correctly to everybody's account that won and subtract the ones that lost. Um, all the pieces in the middle are new to me, and again, uh, selling is definitely not up my alley, but it's more just it is what it is. I'll tell it what it is. I'll use my knowledge and experience to sort of explain how I see it working. Again, depending who I'm talking to, what jurisdiction they're looking at, and what they're trying to achieve. Um, but as for the programming, yes, no, I wouldn't know how to write a line of code to save my life.
and are you still betting while you're, or is the software consuming all your time?
I generally consumes majority of my time. I bet occasionally on little things. Again, as much as I may be an advantage player, I still am a probably degenerate gambler at heart. Um, where if I'm going to the Breeders' Cup, I'll bet some races, whether I have edge or not. I'm going to the British Open in a few weeks. I will have some bets whether I have an edge or not. Um, and again, it's sort of the two sides of it. Yes, I'm sort of in the middle of the complete degenerate that will lose and generally all the time, and it's not healthy. And then you have the guys that are just pure data machines, driven to always have an edge, want to have an edge. It kind of goes back to the conversations that were floating around a few weeks ago on hedging. Um, you know, there's just a massive variance of the top and the bottom, and I'm sort of in the middle somewhere, maybe sort of leaning towards the advantage player, understanding where my edges are, how to find edges, and was more of um, an eye betting guy rather than a data, like watching games, watching numbers and betting rather than going off raw data. Now, of course, over the 25 years of that, I've had access to some great data and some great models and some great gamblers and all those kind of things, and have definitely used that to my advantage, taking that and knowing the weaknesses of operators, again, betting between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m., wherever that is in the world, knowing that they have two guys watching numbers overnight and they can't watch everything, and half the time they're falling asleep. Um, to sort of add some advantageous edges to those kind of things. Um, but again, one of my advantages as well, I've always been able to sit at the track with guys betting 50 cents or $1 and having a drink, and going out to dinner with guys that want to bet, 100,000 on a football game that's on the TV or something like that. Um, it's just a massive range that we come across in this industry, and thankfully I've sort of been maybe had the humility or been humbled to sort of understand that I'm probably never the smartest guy in the room, but I'm again probably on the top echelon a lot of the times, and just understanding what I know and what I don't know.
Well, you
Yeah,
mentioned you were to the British Open, which is golf, and you got a book to shut down golf because you were winning too much. I got a feeling you're not a complete pigeon.
No, I definitely have my spots, and again, know the spots to play, um, and know what to look for and the edges and stuff like that. And I've obviously held my own for a very long time, in that manner. Um, but yeah, again, there's just a few sports that I still really do enjoy and trying to get as much of, whether it's trading it or betting it. Um, and then some sports that I really have no idea of what's going on these days. Whereas 20 years ago, I knew every sport, all the players. There wasn't a single thing that I wouldn't bet.
Wow, that's keeping up on a lot of different things.
well, but
Yeah.
it sounds like your approach was very much top down, which for the you were when you were using the term, you were using it from the bookmaker side, but from the player side, the top down approach means you're basically just looking for bad lines. You weren't sort of crunching any numbers to come up with uh, what the line should be.
Well, yeah, it was a bit of both. Again, taking advantage of the soft outs and the numbers that were off. When I used to go to Vegas, it was sort of day one, walk around all the books, get all the sheets, get all the numbers, um, and then day two would be pack the backpack with cash and go around with bits of paper that I'd circled everything, looking around, um, and again understanding where the strengths were in the market. So Betfair was obviously very strong in some aspects. So any overlays on Betfair, I could go out and bet those and play those edges. Um, when live betting started to roll around and there was different models in, you'd have a Pinnacle and a Bet365 and a Ladbrokes or something, and you could sort of find which one was the strongest at given points in time, and then play the off numbers, etc. in that manner. But yeah, it's as much as that. Again, it's trying to find any advantage that you could, even to the point where, you know, I've never really kept records on my betting, but I'm probably a 35% winner overall, because I'm not grinding out your spreads at minus 110 and things like that. I'm backing, you know, Belmont winners at 80 to 1. I'm backing golfers. I'm backing futures on things and then hedging out. You know, if I'm winning, 1 in 3 bets, I'm probably a long, long way ahead, because my average odds is probably 8, 10, 12 to 1 kind of thing. So I'm just a again, very, very different bettor than what a lot of them are when they're trying to hit their 54, 55, 56%. You know, that's just never been what I am.
So you're looking for a lot less volume and a lot bigger edge.
Well, I like my volume. I'm never, but again, a lot of the time I'm definitely over betting on a lot of the stuff I bet, because again, I'm playing numbers at 20s, 40s, 50s, where you should probably bet a couple of hundred, and I'd bet a couple of thousand, again, with either letting it ride to a certain point, hedging it out. I mean, obviously, Betfair made it a huge advantage for us international bettors, where we could have these big odds things and then lay it back at Betfair, and having the liquidity there. So again, it's really just understanding the lay of the land, knowing the rules of the game, knowing what's out there, what you can play, and then sort of taking advantage of that.
biggest, or one of the biggest bettors in this country for a long time was Billy Walters. Did you ever have any run-ins with Billy?
Um, I was very aware of Billy. Yes, I sort of did occasional things that coincided. I learned very quickly not to chase steam, trying to chase Billy. And then sort of had an idea of what was real stuff, wasn't real stuff, just by the way they moved and the volumes and stuff like that. Um, but we had a few interactions along the way, nothing of great detail or great deal. Um, but yeah, again, he was kind of the US version of 5 or 6 guys that I knew in Australia, and then, 4 or 5 guys that I knew in the UK, and then 2 or 3 Indian guys that I knew on that, those guys existed all around. And again, I think as much as the people that had the advantage in Australia and the UK, again, because it was available and the industry was lot older and been around a lot longer, and obviously more outs at that time. Whereas he was kind of the one of the early ones on the US side of the world.
You mentioned India. Is there gambling in India?
Very much so. I mean, for me, I've always sort of said I think cricket's probably the second or third biggest sport in the world
Wow.
when it comes to gambling. Um, uh, you know, it, Back in the day, they'd often come to Australia for the summer, and I had the pleasure of meeting a number of them, and then we actually went to India, I think in early 2000 over there, and got to see again. It was a lot of cell phones, a lot of pads and pens, and really a lot of betting going on. And again, learned a lot of advantages. One, the arbitraging world. Two, cricket can be very much dictated by weather. So a lot of the times you're actually betting on the weather. Um, it also the pitches that they play on were very very key components of a game. How the pitch is set up. So that sort of taught me to go and find groundskeepers or people at the grounds, so I could get a preview like a day or two earlier. So then again, it comes back to the information and trying to find whatever edges you can, knowing that uh, I don't know what the best way is to explain it to Americans, but generally there's a strip of dirt in the middle of a green field. It's meant to be as flat and sort of dry as possible, but when they play for 5 days in a test match, it obviously can it gets wear and tear. But the idea is on the very first day, if there's a bit of green grass in the pitch, whatnot, then the ball really can take off and you can get early outs, early wickets. So having that information really dictates again. Cricket was kind of really one of the first live betting experiences I had where you could learn where the markets moved and really bet hard early on a certain result, knowing that you could then bet on the other results as the game went on, hedging and whatnot in that manner. Um, so that's sort of where I got the reading a game more so than the data in the game of knowing when to get on, when to get off, and sort of that, I guess, in and out like stock trading or cryptos these days, where you're really just indexing, and I guess kind of what sport trade is trying to bring to the market um, is the buying and the selling at all these different moments, and then obviously the micro betting again, how many runs off and over, which would be baseball, it'll be single, double, out, walk, home run kind of thing.
What percentage of your bets do you not hedge? It sounds like you hedge a significant percentage of the time.
Um,
So,
I mean, majority aren't hedges. Again, a lot of the time I'm betting futures, so maybe over the course of a NFL season, baseball season, again, not so much these days. But I would also always go around to Vegas All-Star break and load up on futures, obviously before seasons, football in August. I go up there in March for derby prices and things like that. I've obviously got way too much gamble in me that I don't probably hedge or don't do things in the manner of the way you should do it by the book. But generally, yeah, when I'm looking for bad numbers or big numbers, I'm writing them to a certain point where then I can sort of earn out of it, whether it's earning my stake or doing something like that. But again, if something's at threes or fours or smaller numbers like that, I'm not looking to do much. But again, if I have, I had the Giants in baseball, a few All-Star breaks, the years that they won it, and I got them at 40s and 50s and 60s. Now I'm really not doing anything until they're either in the pennant game or the World Series, when there's probably opportunities to get out and at least make an earn earlier than that. I'm still gambling to a point where I want to take it as far as I can. And even having Boston in the recent NBA series, I mean, at 2-1, I could have really made a good earn and balanced the books and whatnot, but that's just not my nature, and I obviously rode the Celtics a lot harder and didn't have the result that I could have had.
Very good. I was raised in California, and Golden State is my second best team, so I personally am glad you lost on that. Ha ha ha. But I hope we can still be friends.
Of course.
At the end of our show, we have a recommended section where the host and sometimes the guest recommend something we think our listeners would like. Richard, do you have anything for our listeners today?
Of course. I I have a very weird one this week, but uh so many of our listeners know that I have talked about both intermittent fasting, and I've also talked about keto dieting. And so my recommended is something called Banza pasta. And this is pasta that is actually made out of chickpeas. So there's no flour involved. And this is B as in boy, Banza. And this stuff is great. I mean, it tastes just like regular pasta. And my son found it at Costco, and then I think they also have it at Whole Foods. But it's much cheaper when they carry it at Costco. But anyway, so if you are trying to get away from flour, carbs, etc., you know, this is a great alternative. I was just really happy that he found this. So, Banza pasta.
Well,
That is a good one.
keto doesn't really go for beans and chickpeas or soybeans, aren't they?
They're not soybeans. They're actually, I think they're garbanzo beans. But yeah, you're right. I guess I'm leaning
Mediterranean
more
goes for
toward
beans.
slow carb than no carb, right? So, like
Mhm.
Tim Ferriss talks about what he calls slow carb, which is not cutting out things like beans and vegetables, and yeah. So I'm not full keto by any stretch.
Right. I watched you eat lunch today. That was not a keto lunch.
Well, hey, I'm on vacation, so
All right. So my book is called Ultimate X Poker by James H. Haskell. This is a book for basically beginners at the game. Ultimate X Poker is probably the most popular video poker game out there these days. And if you want to get all the exact strategies for the game, this isn't it. But if you want an introduction to the game and know what it's all about, this is it. So it is an overview, it's the history, and it tells you about several of the different variations of Ultimate X Poker. And a lot of our listeners are not video poker players, but they have heard of Ultimate X and they want to know something about it. So James H. Haskell. So Adam, do you have a recommended for our listeners today?
I actually do. So I've never really been a reader of books. I've probably read one book actually flying to India in my first 40 years, but in recent years I've been doing the audibles where I can listen to it while I'm doing work. And I think in Atomic Habits by James Clear, um, it's sort of about chipping away. And I think if, I had looked at things differently 20, 25 years ago, and especially sports bettors today, everyone wants everything so quick, so fast in that manner. I mean, even the operators want things so quick. They want to, make their money, get out kind of thing. I think if you're, in your early stages of gambling or just learning, just to chip away, just keep finding what you need to do, build the bankroll. Having been broke sort of 4 times myself early on in the days, and then sort of just going home to the parents' place, building up the bankroll again. I think that's the thing. If you can just chip away, realize that you have, so many years ahead of you to keep learning and keep learning. That's sort of a book that I listened to for recommendation probably a year or two ago. And again, it's just, chip away at things and build it up.
And it's a how-to book.
It's just about, again, every day just getting better, just improving sort of thing, 1% at a time and just building it over the course of time. I mean, I'm sure if we look back and think, well, if we had have started playing a guitar or, doing something 20 minutes a day 20 years ago, how good we'd be at something now. And I think betting is not much different, or poker or any of those things. Is just if you find a passion and you want to build towards it, just slowly build it up. You don't need to be in a rush and just take your time.
Sounds like good advice. All right. Thank you, Adam Bjorn. It's a pleasure to have you on the air. Good luck in your endeavors. Thank you, Richard. Go out and hit lots of royal flushes, everybody. Good day.